Welcome to the College Admission TV podcast. Join us for insights from education leaders on today's academic landscape. We are excited to have as our guest Dr.Debra Schwinn, president of the Palm Beach Atlantic University in West Palm Beach, Florida.
All right, Deb, I always like to start off with the personal journey of our presidential guests. And could you tell us who are the mentors that helped shape your path?
Well, I think it's important to state up front that I never applied to university. I was going to be a violinist, a concert violinist, perhaps, or at least in an orchestra. And so I only applied to conservatories. So I would say my first idol would be Itzhak Perlman. He played the violin. He also was in a wheelchair. He was an Israeli who could speak with his violin in incredible ways. And so I always loved him as a model for excellence in his area and creativity and doing it in a different way than anybody else did. So he would do the national anthem in his wheelchair at a baseball game, and then he'd go off and play with the New York Philharmonic. It was wonderful. So that was kind of thinking out of the box. And then through a number of incidents and a deep conversation with my father, I ended up deciding, well, maybe music will be my avocation. And the other thing that I loved was chemistry. So I went to a liberal arts college in the Midwest in chemistry. And then I fell in love with the idea of either doing grad school in pharmaceutical chemistry or maybe medicine. So I ended up going to Stanford Medical School and then met my husband out on the West Coast and then went to Penn for my residency and spent my entire career at Duke University as a physician scientist, running a research lab, doing cardiac anesthesia, and then gradually did more administrative work. I chaired a department in Seattle at the University of Washington, then was dean of the medical school at the University of Iowa. And then literally God called my husband and I here to the only part of the country where we hadn't lived. And we're not tropics people, so we hadn't planned on that. And here we are at Palm Beach Atlantic University, this wonderful, very innovative, creative, but deeply Christ First University, Christian University.
So I am about 30 minutes south of Nashville. And I know out here, and you know better than I do, they call it the fiddle.
Yes.
And so I know that you've had experience also playing the fiddle. Can you tell me what's the difference between a fiddle and a violin?
So you're alluding to the fact that I was in a bluegrass band in college.
That's right. Yeah.
Played the fiddle. And I think that's what got me into Stanford Med School, to be honest. I was just unusual enough with that, with chemistry. So typically when you play the fiddle, you will improvise. I was classically trained. And so the way I did that was to work with the lead guitarist. He also played mandolin, and we would pick out different ways of doing what would sound like improv, but I would just memorize quickly, boom. And so I was literally a struggling improvisationalist. But later in life, I actually went back maybe 10 years ago, worked with a grad student and learned to do jazz improv violin. It was really kind of fun. So,
well, how cool. What a fun story that is. You don't hear that every day. That's really cool. That's really cool.
As president of a university who's a scientist and a physician, I can honestly say I love the liberal arts and I love the arts.
So tell us about the moment that you heard that you were to be named the president at Palm Beach Atlantic. Was it a phone call? Was it a letter? Was it both? What was that experience like?
So yes, I got a phone call at the airport on my way back from the interview. And I had also been offered a position at a different university. And so my husband and I really sat down and said, wow, what should we do? And this is a Christian university. We take very seriously that mission. And so what my husband and I did is we told everybody to wait for a couple of days, and we went to a Catholic retreat center on Saturday after work was done, spent the day in silence, and literally I heard God say to me, I created you as an innovator. Go to the institution where you can innovate today and not tomorrow. And Palm Beach Atlantic University was ready for innovation. The board was ready for innovation. And we're in a unique part of the country that's growing and global. And so that combination really made it clear that we were being called here to Palm Beach Atlantic University. So we haven't looked back since.
Well, and I'll tell you, your experience has included large private research institutions, large public institutions, and now you head up a private faith-based institution that that's a little bit smaller. But can you talk a little bit about? I would imagine you get to know everybody at a smaller institution compared to a larger research public or private institution. So what's that experience like? Working in a smaller institution, but again, I don't want to speak for you, but probably getting to know, everyone.
Well, most everyone. It's still big enough that I don't know everybody's name. I wish I had that pastor's gift. But I made sure that I sat down with every faculty member when I arrived in their office so that I could find my way around campus and know where they lived. But I started 2 weeks into the pandemic. Literally, I started April 4th and took over May 4th in 2020. And so I didn't think my clinical knowledge would be very helpful, but I was initially meeting everybody by Zoom. So I was very careful to hear their stories and through that really to connect. But what I love about being at a smaller institution, I mean, if you think 4,000 is small, it's certainly not 30,000 like University of Iowa or 15.
Well, still a pretty good size.
Yeah.
Still larger than a lot of private schools. Yeah.
But I started at a small liberal arts university in Ohio. And for me, that was probably the best educational experience I had of all of my training universities. Even better than Stanford, because frankly, the one-on-one interaction with my faculty allowed them to say, Deb, we know you can get this material. And frankly, we think we can stretch you even further if you work a little harder. So that knowledge base, that intimacy of knowing and supporting and pushing is what's really, really important. And then at a faith-based institution, to have people come and say, how is your faith walk integrating with how you're thinking about this problem or what you want to do for your life's work? Where's your calling? And is it a calling or are you just trying to have a job? So that's really the difference. I think at a liberal arts institution like Palm Beach Atlantic University, our mission is to grow in wisdom, lead with conviction, and to serve God boldly. That's what we want to equip our students to do. And that's real. It's not just knowledge. It's not just classes and a job. It's a way of life and servant leadership long term. So it's just, I've never worked at a place that I could be happier to get out of bed in the morning than PBA.
So do you conduct campus visits yourself personally?
I do, but usually with donors.
Okay,
And
with donors. Okay.
I love to do it sometimes in conjunction with our admissions staff because we're in South Florida. So the campus is 23 acres right here in downtown West Palm Beach. And then we have another 76 acres in the flight path of PBI Airport, about a mile and a half from campus for our athletic campus. So it's almost 100 acres. So we use golf carts. And so I let the students or other VPs go ahead and drive the golf carts while I sit and talk. And I love just going around campus, giving a little bit of history and also vision for the future.
So when you're talking to donors, what makes a successful fundraiser?
Relationships. It's really it's not about us. It's about using where we feel God's calling PBA into the future to excite a donor about something that already is a passion for them. So it's really coming to understand their own journey, why they were successful in business, or what's important to them related to family or to their outlook on life or the arts, perhaps. And then seeing things that they are passionate about and matching it with what is needed on campus. That's really what development's all about. So it's not about getting money. It's actually about providing a meaningful outcome for what people want to do.
Well, and when you're talking to prospective families, what's that number one question that you get from parents?
Well, it changes and it has changed over the last 2 to 3 years. But I think they really want to know how we stretch their students. Frankly, parents want to have their children be exposed to, well, in particular in our context, a traditional biblical viewpoint, but they don't want it to be limited to that. They want our students to be able, their son or daughter to be able to understand other worldviews, and then how to intersect the two, how to have a conversation that's respectful between parties, even though you may come from different worldviews. That's what we're all about. And, they also want to make sure that their students are ethical when they get out in the workplace. And so we have lots of scenarios where we discuss that in class. So I find that our families, frankly, are just kind of refreshed when they arrive, because they've not always been able to find that in every institution nowadays. I think historically, all universities had that, but we've changed over the last 100 years, many of us.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, you're in a great location.
Yes.
You're close to it. You're in a great location. And so when you look at career paths, what type of business relationships have you formed to really help students, walk that specific path that they want to take, whether it be, a job that doesn't exist today, that may exist 10 years from now? How do you make sure that they're career ready? Great
question. I thought you were going in terms of business. So let me do business first, but then I'd like to step back and say, how does really liberal arts and a Christian institution prepare you for your life of many jobs? But let's start with business. We live in South Florida, and in West Palm Beach, New York, California, much of the country is moving here. In fact, Wall Street South is what it's been dubbed, because Goldman Sachs is bringing its headquarters for all of its finance about 8 blocks from us in downtown West Palm Beach. And then the non-financial headquarters is heading to Miami. They're going to have a regional office on Wall Street, literally. And so our students, I was going to say $1 million question, because literally there's hundreds of other companies that are following after them. So building is booming. People are moving here. We're building houses. It's a very different scenario than other parts of the country right now. There are universities closing right now. We are growing. We've had the biggest incoming class in the history of our school last year, and we just beat it this year. So, we're excited about that, but it's really being a university that is based, again, in traditional biblical worldview, but in a location that's international, and that where you have these opportunities for internships and stretching. But let's take a step back now and sort of answer that second question, or the second implication of your question. And that is, how do we ensure that students are ready for the future? And I think the single most important answer to that is to help our students think critically. And it's not about that first job. In fact, studies show that you may get out and have a higher paid job if you're just doing STEM. And I love science. So STEM is important. And we have strong STEM and healthcare programs, both at undergrad and grad levels. But if you only do STEM, you may have a high salary coming out, but you're not necessarily going to have the same level of increase as you would if you're changing jobs and growing with your jobs over time. I think our graduates today need to come out with an ethical north point. They need to be able to truly be relationship builders, but be able to think critically is the crucial piece, along with honesty, showing up on time, all those other standard things. But that's what gets you through how to do things in new ways. And if you talk to really cutting edge STEM companies, let's just talk about Microsoft or a company like that at that level. They want people that have STEM and humanities, because humanities is what helps you think critically. And when you have that critical thinking, that's what produces innovation in whatever field you're in, whether it's ministry, whether it's arts, whether it's business, whether it's teaching. So I think that's really important.
So how does Palm Beach Atlantic address access and affordability? Because I do think that there's just a perception, I think, and around private versus public, private expensive, public not expensive. How do you overcome that?
Well, first of all, the sticker's price is hardly what anybody pays.
Yeah.
There's usually a big discount, and you'd be surprised because there's hidden costs in state universities as well. Most private institutions, including ours, include all of our fees in our total cost. So it would be tuition, room, and board. If you're a state university, you might not have room and board, and you might have thousands of dollars of fees, particularly if you're in science or even in business, in any given semester. So you have to add that all together. And when you do, we've just got some data through ICUF recently, which is the Independent Colleges and Universities of Florida, that shows, frankly, that our universities are not that much more expensive than the public universities after all the discounts and all of the scholarships that we provide. And we need donors that see the need for first-gen students and a diverse student body being able to come to universities. And most of those students want a faith-based university, especially first-gen students, many of them anyway. And so this is where living and being in South Florida helps. We're a majority part of the country. Again, we're growing, but we have all kinds of cultures. The Caribbean culture is not monolithic. It's just so varied. South America is just not one country. It's very varied. And so, between the Latin, Cuban, and then international populations that we have, it's fun. In fact, when we grow, we have so many students on Pell Grants and students that are first gen. It costs us money to grow. We can't grow for having more revenue. So it's a balance where we feel called to actually provide a unique kind of education for first gen and students from all across the country and the world. We have almost every state represented here at PBA. We also have 48, or maybe it's up to 72 countries now represented overall in our student body. So there's students from all over the globe. When I first came, we were 75% Florida. We're now down to about 50% Florida.
So how do you make sure that all students feel like they belong?
That is harder and harder, especially after COVID. I'll be honest. My name is Deb for short. And so I like to say diversity, equity, and belonging. Belonging is the most important word. And it's hard. Our students come from all kinds of backgrounds. We have a lot of homeschoolers. This may be the first time they've been away from home, but they're very mature and very capable of college work. We have students that grew up in the inner city, went to inner city schools. We've got students from other countries. We've got students from, rural areas, and all of them are mixed together. Now, the beauty of that is that there's a curriculum in the classroom, but there's also a co-curriculum. So we have opportunities where students can walk to the beach here. I'm overlooking the Intercoastal right now, but 4 blocks away is the best, most beautiful beach in all of the East Coast. It's Palm Beach. And so students will aggregate and walk across that bridge, spend the day together, come back, study together. And it's a great mixing pot. So we're very cognizant, though, that after a couple of years of students spending time in their parents' basements, literally, that students they're very eager to be with other students, but they haven't done it in a while. And so it's kind of fun to really put back in opportunities for them to be in smaller groups and really get to know each other. So that's always what we want to do, is to have students feel belonging. And by having many different kinds of opportunities for outgoing or for introverted students, our athletes, both competitive athletes and also team sports, that's how we do it. So it's a small enough campus to walk to here that most of our students meet each other. So and get to know each other's name over time. It's just like I can get to know, maybe not all the students' name, but all my faculty and staff. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. How do you make sure that you engage alumni?
Oh, that's a great question. We do have a wonderful homecoming. In fact, it's at the end of this month in September, and a family weekend. And we often do those together. So our parents' council will have special meetings with the various alumni. We love to invite them to games. We have a couple key events during the year here that are quite unique. One is called American Free Enterprise Day, which is where we celebrate the ability that hard work will, in this country, thankfully, be able to produce something positive in business. So we have exemplars of people that have done that well. And then in the spring, we do Women of Distinction. So we take someone in this local region that's really been a role model for our students, but also for adults, and celebrate them. So there's just all different kinds of ways. We have the Lemieux Center for Public Policy. We bring in world-renowned speakers. We invite our local community, but also our alumni community as well for that.
So is competition tough?
Competition. We're in the Sunshine State Conference. We have 18 NCAA Division II sports, and it's one of the toughest Division II conferences in the country. Now, the way the conferences are all reshaking, who knows for the future? But right now, it's actually a great conference to be in.
Absolutely. So how do you define student success?
I would define student success by a graduate who is a Christ-centered servant leader who is going to be a bright light that will bring people together and help solve some of the problems of our future. I mean, it's just that simple. It's asking a lot, but I think we provide a unique education, and our graduates, all I can say is that businesses and people in our area want our graduates. They want them as the nurses, and they want them as the pharmacists, as the ministers, as the business people, because they're different because of the kind of education they have here at a Christian university. In a positive.
So how do you? No, go right ahead.
In a positive way.
Oh, absolutely. And so how do you go about finding your students? I mean, do you reach out to feeder high schools, community colleges? I mean, how do you get the word out, and how do you get PBA's brand out? Not just within an hour and a half drive, but even beyond the state borders.
So great question. There's social media tools now that are just amazing that we didn't even have 5 years ago. We can geo-target schools where we think there might be students of interest. It's mostly you can do little videos, for example, in various different ways in social media that students will be listening to. That usually piques interest. And then we have a wonderful website now that goes into all different kinds of details. And depending on who you are and what your interests are, you get a different website than a student that has different interests. So it really does tailor to the student's interests and helps them find what they want quicker. Also is going to give you a different website if you're a parent or an alumni or just someone shuffling through. So I think there's lots of tricks of the trade that let us know and let the 3 billion people across the world that click on our website know, millions, who we are. And that's changing, really. We used to be a very local school, but now that we're a global school, we're just getting interest by word of mouth, even from after students are here. So our numbers are increasing radically. We've gone, I think when I came, we were a little over 2,000 applicants a year. And now we've exceeded almost 8,000 or 9,000. So it's exciting times.
So where do you see PBA in 10 years?
Wow. So, first of all, we are about strengthening Christian education overall. And some universities are having troubles. They can be private, they can be public, they can be a small Christian university or a small private university. You really have to have a strong, solid fiscal foundation. But then for us, it has to be about who we are. So in our strategic plan, we prioritize mission. So we talk about purpose, people, and possibilities. So purpose would be our mission fit and excellence. So we really try to do the highest accreditation, but we're always very purposeful about that mission of being a Christian university. And then people, and that is really what are the best experiences we can give and those interactions. And how do we take care of our people on campus? It's not just belonging. It's also caring from an institutional perspective, trying to get to ways that we can support our faculty and staff with housing in a high cost housing market, for example, something very practical. And then possibilities. And our campus is located literally right downtown West Palm Beach on the middle of a bridge across from an island that is renowned worldwide. And so we have so many opportunities for what our students can do and how we can grow. And so looking at our campus in terms of a new business school, growing some residence halls, looking at off-campus faculty and staff housing, we're looking at a new beautiful auditorium and health science center. And I'm looking right now on the Intercoastal, looking at some wonderful palm trees. We need to develop this corner so that we have long-term sustainable income beyond just tuition. So being wise about how we use our money to be able to provide more scholarships long-term for first-gen students really is what we see. But we're being very disciplined fiscally on the way to that path.
Well, I can picture the beach right now. I mean, you're painting a beautiful picture, and I can see why students would want to be on campus. Can you expand on, as far as persistence and getting students to that post-secondary finish line? Obviously, they have their careers, but getting to that degree, how do you make sure, whether it be first generation or just freshmen in general, how do you make sure that they stay the course and they persist to graduation?
That's a great question, but I think it's multifaceted. It's really providing support. The whole thing about doing it yourself, that's the, online education has its place. It's very helpful for a certain kind of student that really can't be on campus. But the 18 to 25-year-old students really thrive best on campus. Why? Because they're relational. They're trying to figure out who they are. Who is God calling them to be? What tools do they need? And they're going to be stretched at some point beyond what they think they can handle. And so whether you have accommodations because maybe there is a disability that needs to be addressed so that they can get to class easily and that they can study well, whether it's an academic or whether it's even social. We have not only residents, RAs on floors like you would have at any university, we also have discipleship leaders who lead small groups, who look out for students who might be in their room a lot and invite them to come with them to the beach or to a movie or to just dinner with students on the hall. So I think it's providing all of those supports that undergird, but really are simply walking alongside our students. If you're going to have continuous education throughout your life, you have to be able to ask for help. And so really making that a normal way of doing business with peer tutoring as well as faculty tutoring can help as well.
What's been your biggest surprise since you became president?
Well, COVID was the biggest one.
That's an easy one.
Well, I said yes to be president here and was voted in January and spoke in January of 2020. I bought a house in February. COVID hit mid-March. My flight was canceled that would bring me here early April to start. And so I drove. I was at Iowa City at the time, drove 24 hours, literally over 2 days to arrive to a campus with no one on it. It was fascinating. But the beautiful thing is we're in South Florida. We could do a lot of things outside. We really weighed the pros and cons and actually stayed open during all of COVID. We'd closed the spring that COVID hit, but we did it with a confidence that we felt called to open from a prayer perspective, but also then I'm a physician scientist. So we followed CDC guidelines and, upscaled our rooms, wore masks. Once the vaccine was available, well, we didn't require it. We highly encouraged it. And then we stopped requiring distancing. And we were able very quickly to, if anybody had COVID, we could track who they were with because we had nurses online from across the country, and we could do that within 3 hours. So as a result, we had zero transmission of COVID in the classroom. We only had it with who you study with, who you do sports with, who you eat with, and who your roommate is. So it really wasn't those quick hour-long associations. It was really who you spend your day with. So that's really my number one. And number two would be after COVID ended, this place exploded. There were so many people that moved to South Florida during COVID that was really a hidden piece. And then when companies started coming, Just the number of people and the opportunities, the unexpected opportunities that presented was amazing. So I think we're the only Christian university that is right downtown in an urban setting in any part of the country. There are other Christian universities like in LA, but they're an hour from the downtown area, for example, or in Boston, they're not right downtown. So it's just a unique situation that's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, your location, among many other things, really sets PBA apart.
Yes, although we are not a sailing school. We've optimized our SEO, so it's clear that we're a Christian university.
So what are the top 2 or 3 things that you're thinking about and focused on every day?
The first one actually is to make sure that this is not one person's university, that it really is a group of people, our board members, but also the leadership of the university, who are discerning where God wants to take this university. This is his university. And we feel that very, very strongly. So that's number one. And how do we stay that way for the next 50 to 100 years as society changes? We're whole person education, mind, body, soul, not just mind. And that's going to be needed for everything, whether it's AI, no matter how the world changes. We need ethical people that think about spiritual aspects and the soul aspect of relationships and people and what we say yes to long term. So that's really number one. Number two, I'm constantly ensuring that while we want to be fiscally conservative and prudent, that we don't let that limit us, my board chair has been wonderful in saying, dream big, Deb. People like to fund and to do big dreams. And so what a privilege to be in a space where you can uniquely try things in terms of monetizing our land, for example. And third, how do we ensure that we genuinely care for every single person on this campus? So it goes beyond belonging. It really is caring. And in fact, when I came on campus, I would always ask people the first year, what's the special sauce here? And they would say community. And I was here walking campus one day and I thought, wow, it's not just community. I can feel the Holy Spirit here. So literally it's, those are the 3 most important things I think that I go to bed thinking about every night.
Well, excellent. Well, President Deb Schwinn, thank you so much. I mean, this has been a very energetic, enjoyable conversation. Well,
thank you. I've enjoyed talking with you as well. Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the College Admission TV Presidential Podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll bring you another insightful conversation with a distinguished leader in higher education.